What's going on, lovely people of the internet and YouTube? My name is Derek. Today is May 26th of 2023. In today's video, we're going to take another look at this year's NBA Finals. Currently, the Boston Celtics are in a very intriguing series with the Miami Heat. After falling down 3-0, the Celtics have come back and now trail 3-2. And a win in Miami tomorrow night would make them the favorites to reach the NBA Finals. Earlier this week, I did make a video on the retirement of Carmelo Anthony and how this was essentially a clue that the Nuggets would complete their sweep in Game 4 against the Lakers, and that turned out to be the case. Before I continue, I want to be very clear that these are not necessarily sports betting predictions. I don't want to see any more comments under my videos telling me you guys bet thousands of dollars because of something you saw in my videos. I don't exactly have the best track record. However, there are many things I have called in the past with frightening accuracy. Consider how this past Game 4, where the Nuggets beat the Lakers, after I made this video about Carmelo Anthony, I pointed out how Carmelo retired on the same day as Game 4. Carmelo wore number 15 for the Nuggets, which is the number that Nikola Jokic currently wears for the team. And in this game, the Nuggets fell behind by 15 points at halftime. Now, normally I don't bet on sports games, but when I saw this happen, then I put money on the Nuggets. Just because there's a number alignment doesn't necessarily mean that team will win. But occasionally these things do come through. Now, I want to talk about why it absolutely looks like the series between the Celtics and Heat will go to Game 7. Whether or not the Celtics continue and make the NBA Finals, that's yet to be seen. But what I want to focus on in this video is the significant alignments between the 2004 Boston Red Sox and the 2023 Boston Celtics. So let's quickly talk about this. Now, the Boston Celtics and their head coach, Joe Mazzulla, are attempting to become the first team in NBA history to overcome a 3-0 deficit in the playoffs to win the series. In Major League Baseball, the first team to overcome a 3-0 series deficit in the playoffs was also from Boston, the Boston Red Sox, who at the time were coached by Terry Francona. They accomplished this feat in 2004 against another Joe Torre, the head coach of the New York Yankees. Now, in 2004, not only did the Red Sox come back and give what's called a reverse sweep to the Yankees, but they would also go on and win the 2004 World Series. This was highly significant for Boston, as it broke an 86-year curse known as the Curse of the Bambino that was credited to Babe Ruth. Of course, the Red Sox traded Babe Ruth away after the 1919 season, and they did not win another World Series for 86 years. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the remarkable numerical alignments between these coaches, Joe Mazzulla, Joe Torre, and then also Terry Francona. Of course, the name Terry very close to Torre. And then we'll also look at how Heat coach Erik Spoelstra ties into this as well. Babe Ruth was often called the greatest of all time in the sport of baseball. The Celtics also had a greatest of all time, Bill Russell, who passed away last year in July. Bill Russell's number 6 is currently adorned on the court of the Boston Celtics on both sides. So first, let's talk about these connections with Joe Mazzulla and Joe Torre. Now, on this channel, we talk about the language of Gematria, which is the ancient occulted practice and observation of the numbers that lie behind the alphabet. Of course, this all begins with simple English Gematria, which is the simple alphabetic order. This cipher branches off into what we call the base 4 methods. And notice the reduction or Pythagorean method, which uses the rules of numerology to reduce every double-digit number to a single digit. Using this reduction method, the name Joe Mazzulla sums to 43. Joe Mazzulla is trying to eliminate the Miami Heat, which also sums to 43 in that same cipher. This brings us to another Joe, Joe Torre, who once again was the manager of the Yankees when they lost to the Boston Red Sox in 2004. The name Joe Torre also sums to 43. Now, on this channel, I talk a lot about prime number connections. If you'd like to improve your skills at numerology, I always suggest a better understanding of prime numbers, and these are highlighted on the number properties on my website. The 43rd prime number is 191. Joe Torre was the manager of the New York Yankees. In the alphabetic order, New York Yankees sums to 191. Joe Mazzulla was hired as the head coach of the Boston Celtics back on February 16th is when he was hired permanently. You'll see here, the Celtics officially named Mazzulla their head coach. On that date, Erik Spoelstra, the current head coach of the Miami Heat, was 19,100 days old, which represents this 191. Erik Spoelstra's name has matching gematria with New York City, which is where the Red Sox completed their reverse sweep of the Yankees. But we're just getting started on these alignments between these coaches. Next, I want to check out the ordinal gematria of Joe Torre. First of all, consider how the name Joe equals 30. Joe Torre equals 106. So we get 30 and 106. Well, if Erik Spoelstra loses the next 2 games, he'll hold a similar distinction as Joe Torre. Championship-winning coaches considered to be the best in their sport, but unfortunately, being the first to drop a 3-0 lead. 3-0 like the gematria of Joe. Well, Joe Torre was born exactly 30 years, 106 days before Erik Spoelstra. When Joe Mazzulla became the head coach of the Boston Celtics, Torre was 30,016 days old. Game 7 of the NBA Finals falls a span of 316 days after Joe Torre's birthday. I said NBA Finals, my mistake. It was Eastern Conference Finals. That game would also fall a span of 316 days before the next Great American Eclipse. The name Joe Torre also sums to 110 in reverse. The 106 ordinal, 110 reverse. When the Red Sox started their comeback against the Yankees, Joe Mazzulla was 16 years and 110 days old. When they completed the comeback, he was 112 days after his birthday, which matches the ordinal value of Mazzulla. So what we're demonstrating here is that these men were placed in these positions for a very significant reason. And it's because of how their birthdays line up to these dates. So we're currently in the year 2023. And it's been 19 years since the Red Sox completed their comeback against the Yankees. Now, the numbers 223 and 19 are very significant to the moon. First, we start with the Metonic cycle, which is a period of almost exactly 19 years. In astronomy, there's also the Saros cycle, which is made up of 223 lunar phases, or synodic months. Every 223 lunations, we get an eclipse from the same Saros cycle. So this is also considered a very strong moon number. In the alphabetic order, Boston Red Sox sums to 170. This is the Latin value of the word moon. Latin, an extended method I teach, considered to be the most significant outside of the base 4. So in Hebrew Gematria, the moon sums to 223. The Latin name for the moon, Luna, has an ordinal value of 48, and the number 223 is the 48th prime number. In reduction, Boston Celtics equals 48. Their head coach, Mazzulla, equals 223. Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals began exactly 223 months after the Red Sox began their comeback in Game 4 of the ALCS. 223 months is also exactly 18 years and 7 months. That Red Sox comeback was completed against the New York Yankees, which sums to 187 in reverse gematria. Joe Torre, who was the manager of the Yankees at the time, was born on the 18th of July, which is the date written 18/7. When the Celtics announced that Joe Mazzulla would become their permanent head coach earlier this year, he was exactly 1,807 weeks old. This means he was also exactly 33 weeks after his birthday. This brings us to the next part of this decode, which talks about the number 33. One day before Joe Mazzulla was named the head coach permanently, Terry Francona, who once again managed the Red Sox to their comeback, turned 3,330 weeks old. Game 7 later this week would be a span of 33 days before Joe Mazzulla's birthday and 330 days before Terry Francona's. In 2004, the ALCS took place when Eric Spoelstra was 33 years old. And that Red Sox comeback began on a date with 33 numerology. Meanwhile, Joe Mazzulla, the other coach of this series, he was 16 years old when that series began. And notice how 16 is the first number that sums to 33. This year's NBA Finals, which begins on June 1st, falls a span of 33 days before Joe Torre turns 30,300 days old. Consider how NBA Finals equals 33, so does New York. And remember, the Miami Heat did beat New York on their way to the Eastern Conference Finals. Not only does New York equal 33, but notice how Boston Celtics has matching gematria with 33. I keep opening this link, my bad. But yeah, 33 equals 156, just like New York, New York. And this brings us to Boston Celtics, 156. These are all numbers that are connected to Freemasonry. And of course, we're in the year 2023. The word Masonic equals 223. See the last uploaded video on my channel with Damar Hamlin from January about how this year, 2023, kicked off with a major Masonic ritual. Ancient accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry equals 187, while Masonry equals 33. Again, all numbers featured in this last section here. Also, 223, 187, and 33. These aren't just gematria numbers, but these are also numbers connected to sacred geometry. Again, every 223 lunar phases, we get an eclipse from the same Saros, and total eclipse equals 187, eclipse 33 in reduction. So this year's Game 7, if it does occur, would fall on a date with numerology of 77. And this is achieved by adding the digits in the date together, 5 plus 29 plus 20 plus 23. And 77 is another significant number to all of this. First of all, consider how Boston equals 77 in reverse. The Celtics comeback would be connected to the Red Sox comeback, and Red Sox also equals 77. Using the Fibonacci method, Boston Celtics equals 777. Game 7 on a date with 77 numerology. This brings us back to Babe Ruth, the Sultan of SWAT, who was traded from Boston to New York. Notice how Babe Ruth sums to 77 in ordinal, which is the same as Curse of the Bambino in reduction, both 77. Babe Ruth was traded to the New York Yankees after the 1919 season. And just a scanning through Wikipedia here will tell you that in December of 1919, he was sold to the New York Yankees. I guess things were done a little differently back then. Before trades, they just had sales of players. So Babe Ruth traded in 1919. And, of course, I've been talking about eclipses. Consider how the ultimate eclipse number is 1,331, which gives us this 1919. Ruth's first season in New York was 1920. Eclipse 192, but let's just focus back on this 1919. When the Eastern Conference Finals began on May 17th, Erik Spoelstra was exactly 19,190 days old. Babe Ruth, his first World Series with the New York Yankees was in 1923. Game 7 falls 19,203 days after Erik Spoelstra was born. And then Ruth would go on to win another World Series in 1927. And 1927 is the Latin Gematria of Joe Mazzulla. Finally, Joseph Mazzulla has matching 193 Gematria with Terry Francona in reverse. And again, these are the two men who are trying to lead Boston to the first ever 3-0 comebacks. Heat coach Erik Spoelstra was born 193 days after Terry Francona's birthday. And check out how Spoelstra's team, the Miami Heat, also sums to 193. This is another number connected to Babe Ruth. George Herman Babe Ruth, summing to 193 in the alphabetic order. And he was traded in 1919, which was 104 years ago. George Herman Babe Ruth also sums to 104 in reverse reduction, just like the name Mazzulla. 104 in reverse. Real quickly, I was supposed to remember this, but earlier I pointed out all these 33s that are connected to what's happening with the Celtics this year. Well, Bill Russell, the legendary Celtics player who won a record 11 NBA championships during his career, Russell died on July 31st of 2022. Measuring from that date to Game 7 is a span of 303 days. And just think about how you add 3 plus 3, you get the number 6. Bill Russell wore number 6 throughout his entire Celtics career. And once again, the Celtics literally have the number 6 stamped on their home court this season. One more thing about Bill Russell and greatest of all time. Like I said, Babe Ruth once considered the GOAT of baseball. Bill Russell considered a GOAT of basketball. Well, last year in July, I made this blog post about how the greatest of all time in pro wrestling, Ric Flair, had his retirement match on the same exact date that Bill Russell died. And the name Russell comes from the Old Norse term for red-haired. And Ric Flair was, of course, known for wrestling many times with red hair as he consistently bladed himself during his career. Ric Flair's real name sums to 88, which was the age that Bill Russell was when he died. So go ahead and search my blog for this post if you want more on the death of Bill Russell. But again, I just wanted to point out that this whole Celtics comeback appears to be very legitimate. And, you know, I did say that it was likely the Heat would be in the NBA Finals in my last video on the NBA, but, you know, I hadn't really done a deep dive. And now that the Celtics are starting to gain some momentum, man, it looks like there's really something to this. But once again, all sports bets wrong, or you get your money back on this channel. That's been my guarantee. All right, everyone, so that'll do it for this video. Thanks for tuning in. Please feel free to like, share, subscribe, etc. Peace, love, God bless, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya.